So you need to get some tools, you need to put in some padding, some diagrams, and talk about using some stuff. So there's this great book. It's called The Decision Book. I didn't write it. I don't get a commission from the sales. But it's a great book to start off with to acquaint yourself with strategy tools. So I started off with this book. There are 50 strategy tools. You've read that, right? It's useful. I've got another 40 more from my searches around the net and from my experience. But I found only about 12 or 15 that were useful to me in the situations that I have addressed. Okay? So this presentation is not going to be about tools. It's not going to be about stuff that you can go and use a process sheet and a checklist and start working on strategy. I'm always more interested in how you think about stuff. So this presentation is about how to think about strategy. What strategy is, what it is not, and what passes off a strategy but is rhetoric and semantics. What is content strategy? We'll start with some definitions that are out there. And there was this book that was published by Scott and Anne Bailey. It says that the analysis and planning to develop a repeatable system that governs the management of content throughout the content life cycle. That is the definition of content strategy. You don't need to take a screenshot of the screen, because if you Google, you will get this. If you look up, that's where I got it. These are not my definitions. So she goes on to define strategy. And she calls strategy an alternatives chosen to make happen a desired future, such as an achievement of a goal, a solution to a problem. And these are nice definitions as far as definitions go. But, and I read this thing recently, and it says, whenever you come across the word but in a conversation, you discard everything you heard about before. This is a nice definition, though, of content strategy. It makes good conversation in the office, but it doesn't really define what strategy is about. This, if you look at it closely, is a description of stuff we've been doing for the last 20 years. There's nothing new, right? You plan, and you could call it a documentation plan. You could call it, content architecture. You could call it all of that. And we've been doing a lot of that for 20 years. Here's a hint. If you're doing what everybody else is doing, it's not strategy. This is from the book, The Language of Content Strategy. So let's revisit an old fable. How many of you know the story about the crow and the water? Okay, I see some hands not going up, so I will tell you the story anyway. So there was this thirsty crow. There was drought in the land, and it was looking for water. And it flew around, and it got drier as it flew around, and finally it found a jar with a little water at the bottom. And it couldn't reach into the water without falling in, and if it fell in, it would drown, because the crow is not a fish. So it looked around, and it hit upon a solution. It filled the jar with pebbles, and the water rose up, and the crow drank that water. And that is amazing. I work with people sometimes who wouldn't think of that if they were crows. So what the crow saw, what did the crow see? The crow saw water. The crow saw a jar. The crow saw difficulty, right? There was water there, but you can't drink it. How many times do you see something you want, but you can't have it? All the time? Yeah. Okay. But the crow also saw a solution. How many times do you see a solution? All the time? Okay, great. That means you always have what you want. What did the crow do? The crow strategized. Okay? The crow executed, and the crow won. And the most important part, he crowed about it after he won. This is an important part of it, and this is not to be taken lightly. an important part of winning is to share your win with others as well. That's what social media is for. And there are some people who seem to be very narcissistic about the kinds of stuff they share. I'm not talking about them. Talking about people who share a win so that you can learn from their victories, you can learn from the solutions they apply to their problems. And if you're into content marketing, you share your wins because you need to create an image about your product and your solution and your service. So what is strategy? It's an approach to solve a problem. Various approaches to solving a problem. You're not wrong, okay? You're all right. The route to a solution. So all of these are correct answers. Okay, there are components to a strategy. There is no point in a strategy without a goal. You need to have a strategic goal, right? You need to have a goal which is a win, or you need to have a solution to a problem. So strategies are used to win and strategies are used to solve problems. And we get the word strategy from what discipline? We get the word strategy from warfare, yes. And I read a lot of Sun Tzu. He's very interesting. I read Arthashastra as well. Arthashastra is a little more devious. Sun Tzu talks about stuff that you can actually do with a clear conscience. Resources. What resources did the crow use? And what is important about using the right resources? What could he have used instead? There could have been straw, there could have been wood, he could have used mud, there could have been sheep shit lying around, and a lot of absorbent stuff that would have absorbed the water, and the crow wouldn't have had water to drink. What did the crow understand about the terrain? It's a closed pitcher, right? And if you drop things into it, it will get higher. You raise the bottom of the pitcher, essentially. Tactics and trade-offs. A strategy is a plan that includes trade-offs. A strategy essentially is a plan that turns a disadvantage into an advantage. And at the end of the presentation, I have a little story if we have the time. The Fable Revisited. So while I was looking for images of the crow, I found other images. And here's one version that I saw at one place. So there's the crow, and that's one solution where it drops pebbles in. There's another solution where it breaks the side of the pot and then it reaches in, and there's the third one where it uses a straw. This is a modern solution. And someone said, if there were no pebbles, then the crow could have taken a stone and broken the side of the pot and then sat on the edge and drunk the water. This is the other solution. Use a straw, right? Apparently the pot was near some McDonald's outlet. And please, if there are seats that you see, please feel free to walk across in. So you can walk across, I won't be disturbed. I will continue because there are two seats up front. There's one seat next to the camera. You would prefer to use if you were a crow. The first one, that's the old traditional way of doing stuff. You put pebbles in it and it raises the water. How many of you like this solution over that? Okay. How many of you like this solution over that? Or more people like the solution over that? Okay. Okay, now I'm not going to associate faces with those hands. Because the last two solutions are dumb solutions, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Have you broken a pot? I've broken lots of pots, okay? And we're not worried about the crow getting a spanking, but when you break a pot, you have no control of how you're going to break that pot, right? Especially if you're going to break a pot with and that crow has to be the Arnold Schwarzenegger of crows to pick a rock big enough to break that pot, right? That is not going to work. What about the straw? Why is the straw a dumb idea? It has to make the straw. Why is the... Finding a straw is a problem. It could have been in the McDonald's. Here's why, okay? What is that animal? It's a crow. What does it have for a mouth? A beak. Anyone who sucked anything through a straw knows that you have to wrap your lips around the straw to suck it. Have you ever tried drinking with a smile? Try doing that. That's how it would be for the crow, right? So what happens sometimes when we get into strategy discussions, right? People come up with stuff that sounds plausible, that sounds modern, that sounds like it's, up to date with what's happening. Oh, we have video, so let's put video. Yeah, but this is API documentation, right? Right? So strategy sometimes is a problem. So here are some guidelines. It's not politically correct or very diplomatic, but these are quotes again, they're not my words. Never underestimate the power of mediocre people in large numbers. Yeah, Homer Simpson. And that man made a lot of sense in many things he said. Sometimes when we want to formulate strategy, we get everybody into the action, and there's so much of noise that it takes a lot more work to filter out the noise and come up with a good idea. There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. Peter Drucker. How many of you have experienced that? You've been given a project and everybody voted that it should be done by you, and you do it, and you spend 3 months or 6 months, and at the end they don't use it. Right? That is a huge waste of resources, a huge waste of manpower, and that's the kind of work you give to consultants because you're nice people. What is more useless than this? Yeah. Okay, I won't waste time with that. What is more useless than this as doing efficiently is to do it inefficiently. Right? Because you waste more time and resources, and at the end it's useless. Consensus is nice, but not necessary. And this I got from the last 2 years back. We had this management meet, and we had a presentation on problem solving. And a lot of groups said that they would solve problems through consensus. And there was a director, a very experienced director who's not here today. And she said, I would listen to people, but I would make that call on my own because I'm paid to make that call, right? Ownership is very important to making a decision work. When blame is distributed, or credit is distributed, and people are not so keen on having something that works, right? But if you're the owner of the idea and its failure or success is going to be mapped to you and your career and your reputation, then you will put in the extra effort needed to make sure that it is a workable decision. Consensus is good for execution, right? You need people to participate, you need them to buy into the idea, you discuss execution, and you get consensus on execution. But with strategy, you need to get people who know what they're talking about. Not people who say, hey, let's give the crow a straw. Okay, problem definitions are critical to problem solving. Okay, problem definitions, okay, I said that again. Problem definitions are critical to formulating the right strategy. Goal statements are essentially a snapshot of a world without the specific problem. right? So when you formulate a strategy and you have a goal, your goal is basically a win. So if you take it in the war scenario, right, there's a hill we need to conquer. And our goal is to be on that hill with our flag over there and dead enemies all around if possible. Problem definition is 90% of the problem solution. Applying the fix is the other 10. How many of you agree with that? And how many of you don't? Very few people agree with that. I'll tell you why you don't agree with that. Because we live in an industry where we borrow best practices from everyone. And we just apply other people's solutions to our problems, and then we figure out that it created a much bigger problem than you had in the first place, right? The way to corporate hell is paved with best practices. I was talking, and yeah, so being my wife is sometimes a drag because I discuss work with her and whether she likes it or not, but she's interested and she's a very good listener. I should learn that skill from her. I listen to what I say. I don't listen so much to what everybody says. I have selected listening, but I'm getting over that now. So I was talking to her about problem solving. I said it's 90% of the problem definition is 90% of solving the problem. She said, how does that work? And I'm sure some of you would agree with her, right? I was watering the garden. So these are the kind of weird places where I discuss work. I was watering the garden. I gave an example from there. I said if the water stopped in this pipe, you're watering the garden and the water stopped, right? What are the possible problems you could have that could have caused the water from flowing? My wife is standing on the pipe, okay? Yeah. What is the other, there are lots of things that could happen. I didn't pay the water bill, so there's no water at home. Yeah. Yeah. So I was in Delhi when when we had this conversation. Your pipe is twisted, your pipe has come out of the tap, someone closed the tap, your tank is empty. As soon as you know what the problem is, my wife is standing on the pipe and saying, hey, get off the pipe. I've solved the problem, right? If the pipe is twisted, the tap is closed, the tank is empty, all of these things can be remedied. If I don't find out the problem, if my wife is standing on the pipe and I don't bother to find a problem, I will go and fill the tank. And I will go and check the tap to see if my pipe is plugged in. I will look for twists in the pipe, and my wife is standing right next to me stepping on the pipe. Right? So if you identify your problem, you have also identified the fix. The fix kind of makes itself known. What was the crow's problem? The crow's problem was that it was a crow. Okay, besides that. It was thirsty. Someone mentioned thirsty. Okay. No source of water. The crow did not have access to water, right? The location of the water. Where was the water located? At the bottom of the jar. Was the jar the problem? The water in the jar is the problem. If the jar was a plate, would that be a problem? It wouldn't have? And a plate? Okay, if the jar was a cup, would that have been a problem? Okay. It couldn't swim. Yeah, okay. I didn't list that though because I didn't know you then. The shape of the jar, was that a problem? If it was a white jar? Yeah. The distance of the water at the bottom of the jar, is that the problem? So which of these things did the crow see as its problem? The distance, right? Because the solution was based on the way it defined its problem. So the way you define your problem, the way you define your problem, the way you define your win, is the way you will define your strategy. Now people talk about strategy and tactics. when you have strategic conversations, conversations on strategy in the office? Yeah, okay. The conversation on strategy in the office, I'm going to speak a little faster. and you say something and they say, no, that is not strategic, that is tactical. What's the difference between strategy and tactic? Who said long term and short term? Somebody gave him a chocolate, I didn't bring any. Strategy leads to long term goals. Tactics give you incremental advantage. Okay? So let's look at some tactics. Tactical stuff. Oh, do I have 2 slides of that? Okay. Skills. Skills are tactical. Why? Because skills alone will not get you that goal. But skills will contribute towards that goal. Tools. Authoring, publishing, CMS, data. How many of you have a data strategy? I just said data is a tool. It's a tactic. It's not a strategy. I know there are some consultants out there who call data a strategy. It is not a strategy. It's a tool that you use. That's like calling FrameMaker a strategy. FrameMaker is not a strategy. It's a tool that you use. Data gives you great production side advantages. But it doesn't talk too much about how you publish to the customer. Terrain, domain, medium. Okay, so you need to know your terrain. That is, you need to know your domain. You need to know your medium. What are the mediums that we're talking about? We're not just talking about formats. We're not talking just about help and PDF and Word and all of that. We're also talking about social media. We're talking about gamification. We're talking about, what was it you were telling me over lunch? Predictive and prescriptive information. Okay, so you anticipate problems that the user can use and present them with contextual stuff. They don't need to go through the sock drawer and look through all the socks to get the blue pair. Okay, so that's terrain. Dedication. Is dedication a tactical advantage? Pardon? Dedication, here's how dedication works. If you are dedicated to your project, you will make it succeed. If you're serving your notice period, yeah, you get it? The other kind of dedication that is also important is your management dedication towards your success. How much of buy-in, how much of a stake they have in your success? Are they working at cross purposes with you? Are they managing you for failure, or are they actually facilitating success on your project? Okay? That sort of thing is rare, but it exists. Maneuvers. And I'm using military terms there, and we'll try to get equivalence from our documentation context. Process, interaction, and some of these strategy tools that you will see about in this book. Intelligence. We need smart people on the job. Is that what it's about? Intelligence is about gathering information about your enemy. Not the guys in the office that you want to get even with, but about your problem. And how do you get intelligence about your problem? How do you know that you have a problem in the first place? Yeah? You have a problem when your manager calls for a meeting and says, hey, we have a problem. That is one way. You have a problem when you have a satisfaction survey and it comes out when everyone says your documentation sucks. You have a problem when your product doesn't sell so much. Yeah? So those are symptoms. And one of the strategy tools is a fishbone analysis. Eliyahu Goldratt calls it a reality tree, where you list all of the symptoms of the problem and you find an underlying problem. So there is usually one big underlying problem, and when you solve that, you find the other big underlying problem, and then when you go through that over a few times, you will solve most of your problems and you can make new ones, etc. There's another story about stones. How many of you have heard of David and Goliath? Right? So this is terminology that's crept into our language as well. We call companies giant killers. We call them, Goliaths and Davids. And it's a story about that comes to us from Jewish history. The Jews and the Philistines had a battle. They were poised in a valley, armies on both sides of the valley. And both of the armies were tough. If one army came down into the valley, the other guys would finish them off. When you come down into the valley, lower than the other army, you expose yourself to the archers, right? So they were both there. It was a Mexican standoff. And then they came up with an old device that a lot of old armies used. They had a representative champion. And the Philistines had this huge man, bigger than me, and his name was Goliath. He was huge. And he was muscular, not like me at all. And he was a seasoned warrior. And he came there and challenged these people and abused them and all of that, and everyone quaked in their boots, including their king. And the king said, anyone who fights this man will get half of my kingdom and all of that. And then along comes this little guy who was a shepherd. And he says, I will fight the giant. And he goes there and he takes a sling, and we know the story, right? He hits him on the head with a stone and kills him. And everyone thinks of David as the underdog. Then I watched this little video by Malcolm Gladwell. If you get to see Malcolm Gladwell, check out the story of David and Goliath, and he brings out some new facts. In the old days, there were 3 kinds of soldiers. Okay, Goliath was a giant. He was an experienced warrior. He was well armed, hand-to-hand combat, psychological advantage. David, we think, is as the underdog, right? In the old days, there were 3 kinds of people in the army. You had the cavalry, men on horseback, who went there, and we've seen enough of movies to know what they did. Then you have the infantry, the heavy infantry, people in armor who ran down there with swords and shields, and we know that also. Then there's other stuff that we don't pay too much attention to in those war movies. The artillery, the archers, and the men with slings. Now, armies in the old days were not, paid military people. When a kingdom went to war with somebody else, they had their knights, and then they had all of these people who just came in from the peasants and everyone, and they had spades, and they had sticks and stones, and that's how they fought their battles. The knights in armor were protected, but these guys just went hand-to-hand combat to save their homes from being plundered and their families, right? But the people who made the first impact were the artillery, the archers, and the slingshot guys. And they were essentially, in today's terminology, what would they be? Artillery, yeah, okay. They would still be artillery, but they would also be called snipers in today's parlance. And a lot of the war in the Gulf, in Afghanistan and Iraq and all of that, a lot of the war is being fought by snipers from hiding. People go out on patrol and they don't come back because the sniper has used a slingshot on the guy, right? So you had artillery. And he had a weapon that would shoot its projectile at high velocity. The rocks in the valley were made out of barium sulfate. Barium sulfate is a very heavy and dense material. And when you use that in a sling, it has the impact of a .45 Colt. Slingshots had a range of 200 yards. And people who used them were reputed to be able to drop birds in flight at that distance. But David was a shepherd, and the record goes to say that he'd kill lions, bears, wolves when he was protecting his sheep. So when David came to that battle, he came with a bigger advantage. He came there without armor. Saul told him to wear his armor. He said, no, I cannot wear that armor because I've never used it. He went in over there. Goliath was at a big disadvantage because he was a champion at hand-to-hand combat. When a guy is 200 yards away, yeah, you don't have a chance, right? But he didn't know that because he had other problems too. So when you listen to the Malcolm Gladwell presentation on David and Goliath, he talks about gigantism, the way it affects your eyes, and the reason for Goliath to be led onto the battlefield by somebody else and all of that. Okay? So when you have a strategy, what seems to be an obvious disadvantage can actually work for you. If they put them in a ring or in a cage, David wouldn't have lasted too long, right? But David picked the weapons of his choice. David picked the terms of engagement, and David won the battle. So you might be a small company, you might have a small team, you might not have the tools everybody has, but if you use your strategic thinking, you understand what your advantages are. How many of you have used a SWOT analysis? How many of you have used a SWOT analysis to good effect? I've been in a lot of these sessions, right? One of the first things people want to do is a SWOT analysis. The other one is a fishbone analysis. And then they have the urgent, not so urgent, urgent, important, whatever, right? The getting things done chart. The SWOT analysis is the most useless analysis if you don't know what you're looking for. Because most of our definitions of strengths, weaknesses, and threats would be the same across just about any institution you see over here. You should be using a SWOT analysis to identify your unique strengths, your unique weaknesses, and only then can you formulate a strategy based on that, right? Yeah. So I think for the first time in my life, I'm finishing on time. I had to pare down my presentation to stay with that. Does anyone have questions? The crows that see the picture full. What about the crows that see the picture full? Oh, those are retarded crows. But that's a good question. The first part of that question is good. What about crows that see the pictures full? They don't need a strategy. And there are lots of people who believe that, if you don't have a strategy, you have something missing in life. Not everybody needs a strategy. So when I was studying up strategy, and I'm writing something on strategy, which did not get into this presentation, I discovered that Japanese companies do not have a strategy. There's something that we get from America. America doesn't necessarily get everything right. I was reading about eggs the other day. America stores its eggs, the British don't. That's because they wash eggs in this country and in the other country they don't. When you wash eggs, you wash away that thin protective film, and then your eggshell gets porous and then it's open to infection. So if you don't wash your eggshells, you don't need to freeze it. Britain got it right. The strategy folks have to have a freezing strategy to fix that problem. That you forgot her birthday. Right? So once you figure out the problem and you solve it, you have that, okay? Yeah?
I have the
This
mic.
was the story.
Can I ask?
I had one story about stones and there's a second story about stones. It didn't sound like a story word, did it? Okay.
Eddie, may I ask a question?
Thank you.
Eddie, I have a mic. Here. Left. I have the mic so I can ask a question.
Okay.
Just wanted to ask, you said Japanese don't have strategies, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? How do we learn from that, and what are we supposed to do?
Okay, it's like this. Japanese have what they call a production excellence, right? There's this whole story about this American company or some other country. Yeah, they ordered some parts and they said we will only accept 3 defective parts per 1,000. So they sent them 1,000 perfect parts and then they sent 3 defective parts wrapped separately and says, we don't know why you wanted this, but we made it according to your specifications, right? So it's like this. If I'm going to fight with a 3-year-old kid, okay, I don't need a strategy. So there are companies that don't need a strategy because you have things working for you. You need to have a strategy when you have a problem, when you're at a disadvantage, and you need to use whatever is at your disposal to make that advantage. Okay? Did I answer your question? Okay, we'll take that offline.
They're not Japanese, that's why they fail. Okay,
No.
Even if they are not, even Japanese, right, they do have some strategy
No,
not to
they don't.
strategize.
No, they don't.
They do have strategy not to strategize, right? That's also a strategy.
That's not a strategy. That's a decision.
So, see, because you are in a global economy, right? So where you are bound to have something that will affect you the way you operate, right? To be aware of that and not to strategize is also a strategy. So you can't say that it's not a strategy, it's argumental say. Right?
Okay, so we will end with that statement that some people their strategy might be not to strategize, whatever that means.
Edwin,
Yeah.
one last question. Here.
Okay.
So you talked about a strategy and you talked about identifying the problem. You identify the problem, you have 3 or 4 strategies, you don't know their sound until you implement them, you win, and then you can say that they're sound strategies.
Yeah.
But how do you pick the right one when you have 3 or 4 and you don't know, you have the same problem but you have n number of strategies to get over that problem?
So by this book, there was a point over there that talked about intelligence. Intelligence is about studying it. Okay. One of the ways you can do that, and that was one of the things that I recommended one of my places of work where we did not follow that. We would go out, we'd do customer surveys, we would come back with feedback, and then we would arrive at a solution. Some smart guy would come up with a best practice that somebody else was doing, and that would be our solution. And we did not prototype. We just rolled it out across the company. And then we dealt with the flag, right? So I'm glad you asked that question. So if you've come up with 2 or 3 strategies, you try them all. Or you try them one after the other based on what you think is going to work the most. And that is going to be based on the people you have in your team, the budgets you have at your disposal, your customers, and you get incremental feedback, right? So when you're rushing to that hill, right, you come up with a plan here, and that hill is over there. Halfway to that hill, you step on landmines. What are you going to do? You're going to say, hey, we decided on December, look at the minutes of that meeting. We decided we're going to run. And so we're all going to just walk all over those landmines and get blown up. That doesn't work, right? So when you come across a situation over there that needs re-strategizing, then you get new intelligence and you adapt.
All right, thank you very much. So, thanks, Edwin. I'm going to request Anu to hand over our memento to Edwin. Anu is a past president of STC India. Thank you, Anu.